Disney was always a minority owner in the Halos organization, but in 1997, they became the majority owner. And we think, John and I, we think they did a great job. And there's a lot that new ownership can learn from them, and we'll tell you all about it. You're Locked On with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we thank you for making On Angels your first listen of the day. Every show is free and available on all platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the best way to help us out is by giving us a rate and a review. And if you're watching on YouTube, hello, we're glad that you're here. And you can help the show out with a like, a comment, a subscription, and you can click the bell to be notified every time a new episode drops.
Thank you for being here with us for this edition of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Frisch Brothers here with you, a.k.a. the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
When you wish upon a star, the Angels won't go very far.
Hey!
How was that? Man, you
John,
know, we're talking
Angels
about...
just won the World Series. What are you going to do next?
I'm going to Disney World. Listen, we're talking about the Disney era of the Angels and the ownership and lessons that can be learned from that era of ownership. And the reason why is because with the pending sale of the Angels, we really wanted to look back at the previous owners, Gene Autry, Disney, Arte Moreno, of course, and what lessons can be learned from them and what the next owner can take into their ownership in 2023, hopefully, crossing our fingers for 2023. Now, I did see the other day, Mike, that Rob Manfred was interviewed on MLB Radio, and he said that there are people running background checks on potential owners, which is a good sign, because before the Angels can give out any financial information, they have to run background checks. Obviously, whoever is going through that is probably going to be just fine, but that means that the process is moving along. So in the meantime, we're going to talk about the previous owners. Let's start with Disney and what we can learn from them.
Now, I didn't know that they actually were a minority owner since the beginning, and then actually took over in 1997. And that was something that was new to me. So if you have been an Angel fan for a long time and you knew that, you knew more than I did. So congratulations. But they actually took over in 97 when Gene Autry handed over controls. And they did some really great things. And I think that one of the things I really appreciated about Disney is that they cared about the fan experience. Now, when we talk about previous owners, there were a lot of faults, right? But I think that the point that we want to make is that there's a lot that the new ownership can learn and that we can actually celebrate. And one of the things I appreciated is Disney really cared about the Big A. And a couple of ways that we know that they cared about the Big A was, one, they actually sold the rights for the name, and it was Edison International Field.
I remember that.
That immediately gets you some bang for your buck, because you're going to have the naming rights sold to an organization and they're going to commit for a certain amount of time. Like, for example, Staples Center in LA, when it was built, it was 20 years Staples Center, right? Now it's crypto.com, but you and I both know it's always going to be Staples Center, right? Yes. You and I both know that that's how it's going to be addressed. When my family was there on Monday, we called it Staples Center. So something about the naming rights is actually a really good direction, a really good strategy. And here's why. Go ahead.
I know it gets revenue, but I mean, I'm so glad it's Angel Stadium of Anaheim.
Oh, for sure.
Like I think it's great that they found a way to earn money from the naming rights, and it's just Edison Field. Edison International Field, especially after an electric power company.
Listen, I get it. I think that if you can actually sell the naming rights and get cash for that and get some resource for that,
they took advantage of it. I get it.
What we called it during the time it was Edison International Field is we called it the Big A. I mean, there was nothing that changed about it for Angel fans. But here's why I think it was a really good move. It actually helped to fund some of what was happening inside the stadium. And you and I have talked a lot about the relationship between the Angels and Anaheim. And quite honestly, it hasn't really been the best. And there are those who say, well, the city needs to adjust. There are those who say the Angels need to adjust.
Right.
But what we found when the Disney company actually owned the Angels is that they had a pretty good working relationship. Listen to this. The city of Anaheim actually contributed $30 million in 1997 to help with renovations, and Disney actually invested $88 million to help with renovations. And they did actually come to an agreement that they would keep the name Anaheim in the name. So even back in 1997, John, that was still a fight between the Angels and the city of Anaheim. And at that time, it really didn't seem like it was a fight. It seemed like it was a negotiating ploy for the Angels to help the city help them. But we now experience a really great stadium. And before Artie, where it's at right now was really influenced by what Disney decided to do when they took over. So here's what I think we can learn from Disney. And then I got a question for you, Johnny. First, stadium experience matters, and being able to upgrade and make this stadium a fun place to go to and watch the Angels, that matters. I think naming rights matters. No matter what you name it, though, we're going to call it the Big A, right? And so my question to you is, do you see this as a plus for Disney and something that the new ownership can take on?
See what you did there?
Like that? And then second, is there a partner that you think would make sense for the Angels to join up with and maybe give the naming rights to the stadium over to them?
Look, you see old pictures of Angel Stadium, and especially after the Rams were there in the 90s, you really saw that it was in need of renovation, and it's beautiful. It's very dated in terms of it needs a refresh, it needs a paint job and all of that stuff. We drove by the Big A the other day, and boy, it was looking like the big pink A out there because it's so sun faded.
Yeah.
And so they really needed a refresh. So it was great to see Disney add their Disney magic to the stadium and give it the look that it has now. And that look has stuck with the stadium the last 20 years or so. And I also am a fan of the fact that they wanted to make Anaheim a destination spot. They wanted Angel Stadium and the Angels to be part of the Disney experience where you can drive down Catella or whatever and get to Angel Stadium and Disneyland in the same day and have a full day in Anaheim and it be a destination experience. They had the movies, of course. They were behind the Mighty Ducks. And so they really invested in the area. And I think that's something that the new ownership can take advantage of to make Anaheim an important place and to separate it from just being another town in Southern California. And they're the ones that got the name changed to Anaheim Angels before we went to Los Angeles. They were California Angels before that. So I really appreciate the investment they made in the team and to provide a great experience for the fans. Now, as far as naming partners for the field, Mike, I got to say, if there's a Japanese influence over the Angels with Shohei Ohtani and potential buyers, Nintendo Field, baby. That's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
That'll go with the Super Halo Brothers theme, right? We'll be
be
invited right in. We'll have season tickets. They'll welcome us in with open arms.
And Nintendo has the money because you've funded them for the last 20 years of your life. So, and we have because of my son. So that's actually a great idea. I wonder if there would be some sort of relationship that could develop from that. Plus, they're actually putting in a Nintendo Land at Universal Studios. And so, hey, I think that we could let this cook a little bit. Let this marinate a little bit. John's speaking it into existence.
Mario and Luigi Stadium? I don't know. Something like that. Level 1-1 Stadium? No, I'm just kidding.
King Koopa's Castle.
Yes.
Well, coming up on Locked On Angels, what do Erstad, Gloss, Benji Molina, and Disney have all in common? We're going to talk about that. But first, Locked On Angels is brought to you by Simply Safe. Johnny?
Simply Safe is where it's at, because right now, if you've thought about securing your home with home security, but you've been putting it off, listen up, because we have a special offer just for Locked On Angels listeners, and they can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is the biggest offer of the year, and you're not going to want to miss it. Listen, the holiday season is coming up, and I have an experience, Mike, that made me really interested in home security. We had somebody come to our door. They were just, walking around and asking for donations. And it was Christmas time. And when I opened the door, the person kind of did one of these numbers, the look over my shoulder and
Ooh.
said, "Hey, you got a really nice place here." And I thought, oh, I'm not very comfortable with that statement. Thank you very much.
No.
So that is what got me interested in home security, and Simply Safe is exactly where it's at. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify if a threat is real, so you can get priority police response. That's huge. Simply Safe is a whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door, HD security cameras for inside and out, smarter ways to detect motion that alert you when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. 24/7 professional monitoring services cost less than $1 a day, less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. With the top-rated Simply Safe app, you can stay in control of your home system anytime, anywhere. You're going to be traveling for the holidays, visiting family. You can arm or disarm. You can unlock for a guest. You can access your cameras or adjust your system settings right from the app. So again, don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system that we recommend here at Locked On Angels. Get 50% off a new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/lockedonmlb. Again, their biggest discount of the year, so do not wait for this. It's simplysafe.com/lockedonmlb. And remember, there's no safe like Simply Safe.
You're going to need to get a Simply Safe because Big Brother can't come down to where you live and protect you every single day. So I'm going to need you to, while we're doing the rest of the show, I'm going to need you to get that, okay? Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen today. And now for your second listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter to the most important stories and biggest stories in sports, you can go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights that only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today is available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Mike, there's something that we can learn from Disney's time as the owner of the Angels. And this is a very important problem that we seem to have these days. I feel like the Angels are finally turning it around.
Yeah.
But they hired the right people to make the right decisions. We've had several GMs over the last 10 years. We've had several managers over the last 5 years. Scioscia was done in 2018. Then we had Osmus and Madden. Now we got Nevin. And the next year we'll probably have somebody because we'll have new ownership. So there's been a lot of fluctuation when it comes to the hiring at the Angels. Now, when it came to Disney, they made some pretty good hiring decisions. Why don't you tell us about those?
Well, the first hire that they made is Mike Scioscia, which was probably the greatest decision that Disney ever made, right? And I remember when he got hired, he hadn't really managed in the major leagues at all, and he'd managed some in the minor leagues, and we knew him because he was the backstop for the Dodgers and friends with Tommy Lasorda. Tommy Lasorda said he was great. And when he got hired, we had a first really good season in 2000. The Angels were hitting a bunch of home runs, struggled with pitching, which that narrative hasn't changed too much, right? And so, but then just 2 years later, we ended up winning the World Series. So Mike Scioscia was an incredible hire and still my favorite manager of the Halos. And I wouldn't mind having him back, even though he's old, because I would love to see maybe some consistency.
When there was a period of time where we weren't sure who might be the manager in 2023, you and I suggested, what if Scioscia came back to help them through this transition? And I got to say, I'm a fan of Phil Nevin. I think that he deserves a full shot at a full season, but that would have been fun, right?
Yeah, I think Phil Nevin's got some Scioscia tendencies, so that's a good thing.
Yes.
But the other hire, John, was a promotion from in-house.
This is big.
And that was the greatest general manager in Angels history because he was the one that won the World Series, and then we won a bunch of AL West. And that's Bill Stonemen, John. Bill Stonemen was fantastic. And both Scioscia and Stonemen were major contributors to the Angels from 2000 until 2009, 2010, they really worked together. And the Angels won 5 AL West championships during that time, plus the wild card and, of course, the World Series. So What can we learn from this, Johnny? Tell us. What can we learn from what Disney did here with Mike Scioscia and Bill Stonemen?
Well, before I get to that, I just got to say, remember Bill Stoneman came back to finish out Jerry DiPoto's tenure because DiPoto left in the middle of the season. And so Stoneman stepped up in the interim role. So thanks, Bill, for coming back and taking the reins to get us through the season. You know, he's like, oh man, you got to get me out of retirement. Here we go. But what can we learn from Disney, Mike? I love that they took a chance on somebody like Mike Scioscia. And I think we see that more and more in managerial decisions. You got Skip Shoemaker with the Marlins. He's somebody that they're taking a chance on.
Right.
What if Phil Plantier is our assistant hitting coach? What if he's the guy at some point? A lot of players like him. A lot of players say he's changed their career for the better. That's somebody that people are excited about. The Marlins fandom was excited about him, and they were surprised that the Angels plucked him out of their system.
Right.
And so that's a possibility. So we're seeing a lot more young managers get to step up to the plate, get a chance in the majors. And that's exactly what happened with Mike Scioscia. But I think the key there is they let baseball people do what baseball people do, and that's do baseball things. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But somebody in the organization, somebody in the organization said, hey, Scioscia is the way to go. Promoting from within and giving Bill Stoneman that job, that was fantastic. And I see a little bit of that now, and I have to wonder, is it because Artie is stepping away and he's loosening his grip on the reins? Because it really seems like Perry Manassian is getting to make the hires he wants to make. He's getting the chance to hire the coaches he wants to make. He is keeping Phil Nevin on because Phil Nevin is receptive to the front office, providing them with information, data, and analytics. And he works well with Phil. And Perry has hired his second driveline person in a row in the offseason. More data for good on-field play. And now we have Bill Hazel as the assistant pitching coach, which is going to be a great thing for the Angels, and Matt Wise, of course.
Yeah.
And we're seeing Perry get a chance to hire his coaching staff. Every GM has had to make a transition and get rid of the last person's coaching staff. And that often has to do with the last manager. So you have Scioscia's team when Billy Epler comes in. You have Osmus's team when Perry Manassian comes in, right? So finally things are lining up in a way where the guy who you want in place as your manager is able to pick his coaching staff. And the guys that you want in the front office are able to provide the data to the players, to the coaching staff, to the manager that you want them to convey. And like you said, there's not going to be any phone calls down to the dugout like there was this season with Joe Maddon. And don't get me wrong, Joe Maddon is a great guy. And Joe Maddon, we were excited for Joe Maddon to be the manager. But the philosophy doesn't line up between GM and manager, then you have a problem. And so this is the first time I feel like Perry is finally getting some of his guys in place. Now, the big question is ownership going to keep Perry Manassian and this coaching staff and this managerial staff? That's a huge question on all of our minds. But I do like to see that Perry Manassian is taking advantage of the fact that, hey, if this is my last year, I'm going all out. I'm going to hire these guys and put the people I want in place. So that's the way it looks to me from the outside looking in. I feel like we're getting the right people in the right places. I'm excited for the hires. Marcus Timms got fired from the Yankees in 2021, but over the years that he was there, the 4 seasons, they put up some pretty good numbers.
Yeah, could I talk about him for a minute? Because I know that a lot of fans have been like, I'm not sure about him. You make a really good point about synergy. You make a really good point about strategy, philosophy, and then you made information and data one word because you're trying to save time. Appreciate that as well. Here's the reality with Marcus Timms, for example. The right place at the wrong time might be what has gone against him. You can also have the right person in the wrong place. And I think with Marcus Timms, he just needs to find the right place because he could be the right guy with all the data information. Sure. I look at somebody like who just got hired with the Texas Rangers, Bruce Bochy. He was not a great manager until he went to San Francisco. Now, with the Padres, he was good, right? I think they went to the World Series once with him, but he went to San Francisco and suddenly he's an all-time great because they won 3 World Series in 6 years. Right. And it was the right place, right guy, right time. And I think with Marcus Thames, for example, I think he's going to be the right guy in the right place at the right time because Perry's going to allow all of what he's doing to get communicated to Marcus, who actually is really receptive to that. And I think it's going to impact this team in a really positive way. So if we look at what Disney did really well in getting Scioscia and Stonemen and all sorts of other guys in the right place at the right time in the right moment, you saw it pop and move forward. And so I think we have to pump the brakes a bit on, well, look at what he did here. He got fired here and he ruined this team and he was with the Marlins and he ruined them. Again, I think there's a lot of factors that go into just you're getting hired, but there's also a lot of factors that go in around that as well. And I think that you're right that Perry is finding the right players for this time in this moment. And maybe we're extra hopeful, but it feels good. And it doesn't feel like we're basing it on something that we can't actually defend or there isn't like substantial evidence there that says that this is going to happen. I think what we see with Perry is something that Disney did really well with Stoneman and with Mike Scioscia.
Listen, just as an FYI to all Locked On Angels listeners, I'm never going to stop mixing up Eric Thames and Marcus Thames. Just putting that out there right now.
John, Disney, as we talk about Disney and how they led this team and when they owned this team and what new ownership can actually learn from them, one of the things that we really appreciated is they allowed the team to do what the team does. We talked a bit about this in the last segment, but one of the things that I think is really important to point out is that this team drafted really well. And Darren Erstad was a part of that draft, and Benji Molina was a part of that draft, and GA early on, Jim Edmonds, Troy Gloss. They were all drafted by the Angels, and they were homegrown. But that wasn't the only thing that they did well, John. What was the other thing that Disney allowed the team and the leaders of the team to do really well when they owned this team?
Like I said it before, they let baseball people do baseball things, and they stayed out of it. They let the baseball people in charge of their respective positions make these kinds of decisions. Look, they drafted well. Like you said, Darren Erstad, Benji Molina, Garrett Anderson, Jim Edmonds, Troy Gloss, all drafted and homegrown. They allowed good trades to happen, traded well. Adam Kennedy was traded for Jim Edmonds, and then he hit 3 home runs in the ALCS and won the MVP, right? So for me, I think that if you allow baseball people to do what they're good at and don't have ownership interference, like we've seen time and time again with Artie Moreno, I think that yields a good result on the field with baseball people allowing them to do what they're best at, what they're the smartest at. Let them make the trades, let them make the signings, let them draft well, not a bunch of interference. Disney stayed out of it and let baseball people do baseball things.
Yeah. And we were successful with Mike Scioscia and Bill Stoneman as Disney was in charge because they built this team through the draft and through intentional trades. And they were thoughtful about it. And when you look at Perry and you see what he has done in the 2.5 years that he's been in charge, I feel like he's kind of following that path, John. Like he's drafted really well. We needed pitching. He selected 20. He signed 19 of them, right? We needed a great bullpen. He signed 2 really good guys that should have been really good for us, but weren't.
Sure.
We needed to be able to put a team together. He went and got people that were necessary to put this team together to help perform really well on the field. He's brought up some players like Joe Adell, and he's made some great trades for like Logan O'Hoppe, even though our heart broke when Brandon Marsh left. But I think that we're going to see some great success from those things. The one pushback I would have against Perry is we got to let them actually perform and make a decision about them so they're not left in limbo like Joe Adell was last year. But there seems to be, at least from my perspective, Perry following similar to what maybe a Bill Stoneman did and what Mike Scioscia did and what the front office did when Disney owned this team. Do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I see Perry, like I said in the last segment, I see Perry Manassian getting the chance to hire the right people and bring the Angels into the 21st century, for crying out loud. I mean, so many people have come along, wanted to implement analytics, and it was just constant headbutting. It was constant headbutting between Dipoto and Scioscia. Epler seemed to lean too far into it. I think Perry has found the right balance of the information you need versus letting a manager manage. And for Joe Maddon to have been as forward thinking as he has been in his career, I'm surprised that he was so resistant and hesitant. And also it just seemed like Perry was not a fan of his decisions on the field.
Right.
And
they didn't
you
trust
and I
each other
weren't
sure.
for a while either, because there was so much bullpen management that we were like, oh, what are you doing? And taking starters out of the game early and bringing in relievers in the middle of an inning when there's runners on and not giving them a clean inning and whatnot. That was super frustrating.
Yeah.
And I think the writing was on the wall, and I think Perry had enough. So I feel like Perry Manassian, again, is working hard to put the right people in the right places. And if new ownership comes in and lets these guys stick around, I'm not sure if they're going to want to clean house or not, but this is the first time where I feel pretty confident in who Perry has installed in the minor leagues for scouting, things like that. All but one of the coaching staff in the minor leagues is staying. All of them are staying. I just saw that news yesterday. I think the only one leaving is the AAA manager. And I think that's a good thing. That's consistency.
Yeah.
It provides assurance for the players who were there, the coaching staff who is there. I really think Perry is finally sinking his heels into the ground with the Angels. And like you always say, Mike, it takes 3 years to really put your thumbprint on an organization. And while he hasn't been there 3 years, this will be year 3. I think that he's finally getting the chance to do that with the Angels.
Well, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen today. Now for your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, sharing some of the biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. You can find the Locked On Sports Today podcast on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, we know that the company that owned the Angels in the form of Disney is not the same Disney it is now, Disney Plus and everything that they are doing now, the creators of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But would you like to see an Angels Cinematic Universe? Would you like to see Disney own the team again in some form or fashion? Let us know by getting at us at Locked On Angels or at Super Halo Bros on Twitter. And of course, you can comment below. Maybe you have some other ideas for ownership. Maybe some of the names out there excite you. So let us know who excites you. In the meantime, Mike, what do we have on deck for tomorrow's show?
Well, we talked about good old Gene Autry, which brought a tear to one of our listeners' eye because he remembers his dad telling the story about Gene.
Great story.
And then, of course, we talked about Disney today. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about where Artie went wrong. And that's going to be a great conversation. And we would love for you to join in on that one, too, as you watch and as you listen. But join us tomorrow as we talk about where Artie went wrong on Locked On Angels.
You're going to want to be here for that conversation. In the meantime, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
That's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Angels, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.